As it happened, Carter's intuition was right on the mark. He had considered that Ali would provoke Melvin, hence with good intentions, had warned Melvin to watch out for him. But he didn't actually expect such a serious incident to occur in less than 2 days after Melvin was transferred over to Block B. A bone-chilling scream erupted from a corner cell on the ground floor, and all the prison guards in the cell block rushed towards that corner in unison. Carter had only just come through the corridor to Block B, still with undelivered mail in his hands. As a civilian prison staff, it wasn't convenient for him to rush to the forefront. He could only lean against the railing on the second floor and peer down at the situation in the corner cell of the ground floor. Ali was led out of the cell first. His expression was severely contorted, and his whole face was beaded with sweat. He had guards flanking him on all sides. It was only after the guards had brought him to the second floor and passed by Carter that he noticed a toothbrush with its handle ground into a sharp tip was stabbed into his left palm, dripping a trail of crimson blood behind him. What happened? Carter pulled hold of a guard he was well acquainted with to ask. He got into a fight with 1017. The guard stopped in his tracks. We're sending him over for a checkup with Dr. Lewell first. I reckon he'll probably have to be hospitalized outside as well. Was it Ali who acted out first? Carter asked again. He said that 1017 was the one to provoke him first. Your guess is as good as mine, said the guard. Every time a fight or a brawl occurred, the people involved would find excuses to justify their actions. While Ali said that Melvin had provoked him first, it wasn't clear how much of it was the truth. This 1017 is really savage. He got into a fight twice and sent away 2 people. The guard jested. If anyone wants to take a stroll outside to a hospital next time, they can just go up to him. At this, Melvin was also brought over by other prison guards. However, unlike Ali, he had handcuffs on his wrists. The guards surrounding Melvin weren't as tall as him. As the cluster of them approached Carter, only Melvin, in his bright orange prison uniform, had a palpable presence, whereas the other guards had pretty much faded into gray cardboard cutouts. Melvin wasn't showing any particular expression on his face. Even his breathing was steady. If it weren't for the injuries left behind from the fight on his hand, it would have been impossible to tell that he had just disabled someone. The distance between them closed. When passing by Carter, an expression finally appeared on Melvin's face, but it was very, very faint. He simply looked at Carter calmly, as if saying, "Morning, Officer James." But Carter wasn't in any mood to greet Melvin. He and Melvin had gotten too close during this period of time, so much such that he almost forgot how dangerous this man truly was. Ali was sent to a hospital for external medical treatment, whereas Melvin had his wounds tended to at Luke's infirmary before being sent to a confinement cell in Block A. The warden had immediately ordered a thorough room check and seizure of all contraband. The whole prison was bustling with activity. Only Carter and Luke had the leisure to smoke and chat on the balcony. The guard who escorted Ali over said that Ali had thrown the first punch. Luke had given Ali's left hand basic first aid. He had greater access to first-hand information than Carter. Carter wasn't surprised in any way. From his impression of Melvin, only when someone first came to mess with him would he display aggressive tendencies. But there's a problem. Luke puffed out a mouthful of smoke. He looked at Carter, and he said, the inmates in his cell all said that Melvin was the one to provoke Ali first. Carter flicked off the cigarette ash with his thumb, asking, "How so?" "Don't know," Luke shrugged. "I'm only giving you a reminder. You'd better keep your distance from him." Carter didn't immediately answer. He didn't feel that he and Melvin were so close to the point that he needed to keep his distance. He fell silent for a moment before asking, "What if it was Old Nine who instructed them to say so?" "You're still speaking up for Melvin," Luke said. Carter believed that he was already being very objective. However, Luke did have a point as well. After turning it over, it was possibly because he had more chances for interaction on a day-to-day basis with Melvin, and thus knew how he was like usually, whereas Luke essentially only saw the way Melvin was like when he beat others up. Winding the clock even further back, not only did Carter know what Melvin was like in prison, but he'd also seen the way he was in normal life, hence instinctively spoke up in defense for him. "You're still the same as ever," Carter said, "always worrying about others." "You know me, I can't help it," Luke said. "I heard that Melvin will be transferred to Block A after being let out of confinement." "It appears you were right before," Carter exhaled. "He might as well have been classified as a high-risk inmate from the outset." Regardless of how it came to be, the result was still that Melvin was sent to Block A, the cell block with the strictest security. The inmates there were in a completely different class from those in regular cells. Most of them had blood on their hands and were either on life sentences or on death row. These people were allowed a limited number of visits every month and weren't allowed to participate in the evening group activities. Even if each of them had a single cell to themselves, no ordinary inmate would want to be shut in there. Melvin's confinement period this time was 72 hours. Perhaps 3 days might seem like a short time, but when enclosed in a small and dark confinement cell, every second would feel unimaginably torturous. The confinement cells were situated on the 3rd floor of Block A. Normally, Carter wouldn't make his rounds here when delivering mail. However, after sending out the last letter in Block A, Carter hesitated for a while, and he ended up changing his route to head to a floor he had never set foot on before. "Officer James, the Block A supervisor just happened to be patrolling the 3rd floor. What brought you up here?" "I came over to have a chat with 1017. It was quite normal for a prison officer to come and speak to an inmate. However, since this is someone else's territory, Carter didn't hide his purpose. "Chatting about stocks?" gossiped the block supervisor. Between the prison staff, it was no secret that the warden had gotten Melvin to look at stocks. Some of the staff who also dabbled in stocks would even actively seek out the warden's secretary for tips. "Yeah," Carter didn't elaborate. "Alrighty, he's behind the 3rd door over there. Just give him a holler." Unlike other cells, there wasn't a regular window on the iron door of the confinement cell, only a small window to deliver meals through on the lower side. Carter squatted down, sliding the panel open, and could immediately hear heavy panting inside. He lowered his head and glimpsed in. Melvin was doing push-ups. 117, Carter called. "It's me." Melvin was shirtless. The dim lighting shone across the length of his back, faintly carving out the toned muscle lines. "Officer James?" Melvin stopped. He took the shirt lying on one side to wipe his sweat, then sat down cross-legged by the door. "What is it?" The position of the small window was really a little low. Since Melvin was right behind the iron door, Carter simply sat down, his back leaning against the door. He tucked his chin, speaking towards the small window. "I've got a question for you." Melvin chuckled softly, also shifting himself to lean his back against the iron door. "You do have a lot of questions." If there weren't this iron door between them, they would be back to back with each other. Carter quieted for a while, until Melvin's breathing behind the iron door had calmed, before asking, "Did you do it on purpose?" "What on purpose?" Melvin asked back evenly. "Ali," Carter said, "you provoked him on purpose, right?" "If ignoring him counts as a provocation, I guess." "How did you ignore him?" "Probably, in a way, I treated him like air." Every cell had its internal pecking order. The person on top could have many privileges, such as in the distribution of goods and so on. The top dog of Melvin's cell was Ali. If he treated Ali like air, that could certainly be seen as a provocation. Getting the answer he expected, Carter lightly huffed, saying, "So you did do it on purpose." Deliberately provoking Ali until he flew into a rage, the moment that Ali couldn't hold back his fists, Melvin was forced to counterattack. In this way, the punishment he received would be minimized. Even if Carter had spoken up for Melvin to Luke, in actuality, he already long had a hunch that Melvin wouldn't be someone to act out when in a passive situation. The reason that he would do so was very simple. "You want a single cell." Melvin didn't deny it. "You caught me, Officer James." Although he would lose some freedom in a single cell, it was better than having to constantly watch his back. If Melvin continued to stay in Block B, it was equivalent to being exposed to danger at all times. On the other hand, being transferred to what seemed to be the more dangerous block, Block A, would instead guarantee him absolute safety. "You're going to be cut off if you keep with this," Carter said. The single cell wasn't a single room in a hotel. He could only sit in suffocating silence alone. However, humans were social animals. Being holed up for too long was bound to cause problems. "I don't need to interact with cons." At this, Melvin paused. He switched to a lighter tone, half joking as he said, "Besides, I've you, Officer James." Carter wasn't in the mood to joke around with Melvin. He spoke towards the window. "Don't do that next time." "Do what?" "Use violence to resolve your problems." The man behind the iron door gave a careless laugh. "Are you giving me an ideology class, Officer James?" "I'm not joking with you, Melvin," said Carter seriously. "If you do this again, I really won't read for you anymore." This time, Melvin fell silent, and there wasn't any reaction from behind the iron door. Just when Carter thought that there wouldn't be any at all, he heard Melvin exhale gently, asking, "And what if violence is the only way to solve it?" Carter didn't hold out hope that a casual few sentences from him could change the style with which Melvin had always done things. He said, "If need be, then please mind how far you take it." If it wasn't breaking a bone, it was disabling a hand. Carter had never come across such a reckless person. Melvin responded faintly, "All right, I'll listen to you, Officer James." Carter wasn't sure if Melvin was just fobbing him off, but in any case, he had already expressed himself. Whether or not Melvin listened had nothing much to do with him. He got up, preparing to leave, and Melvin's voice came through the small window at this time. "Since I'll listen to you, will you chat with me tomorrow as well?" Melvin lazily dragged the syllable at the end of his words. "It's boring here." It was only natural to find it boring in the confinement cell. Carter got up to leave, his Dr. Martens boots clipping on the ground, evenly tossing him a sentence. "If the mood strikes me." Carter was slightly unused to not seeing that familiar figure in the library. Inmates often came in and out of prison. Today someone would be released from prison, tomorrow someone else would be transferred to another prison. Nobody would find having less any weird. Or maybe Melvin was just a little bit special. After all, they were just a few pages away from completing strawberry planting techniques, and Carter kept feeling like he had left something unfinished. In the past few days, Gavin kept finding excuses to run over to the infirmary. Carter didn't know how many times it was that he told Luke not to indulge this kid so much, but the moment that Gavin eagerly called Dr. Luo, Luke would, against every rule, allow Gavin to use the computer. "You're really going to spoil him," Carter said. "Since when was there an inmate with as much freedom as he does?" "You know him. He's just a silly kid. He doesn't have a bad heart." This was Luke's excuse every time. Carter sighed, not knowing what to say. Luke's type was exactly the younger brother sort, especially those that needed him to look after them. A person's preferences were like genes that were engraved in their bones. They weren't that easy to change. Carter also had his own preferences, so he knew that he was in no position to tell Luke what to do. Man. Behind the computer, Gavin slumped in the office chair, crestfallen, staring vacantly at the ceiling as he said, "The god of Go has disappeared again." "It's only been a few days. Do you miss him that much?" Luke asked. "He hasn't replied to any of my messages," Gavin said despondently. "He used to always reply to me. I don't know what's going on this time." "Maybe your idol can't be bothered to deal with you." Carter knew what was on Luke's mind. Seeing Gavin so fixated on someone else, he couldn't resist but jibe at this ungrateful brat. "He's actually lazy to deal with others. But I'm an old fan of his. He treats me differently." Well then, the idol filter this kid had was too thick. Carter patted Luke's shoulder in consolation. "It's highly probable that capitalists have set their eyes on him." Gavin sat upright, his expression grim as he analyzed. "Someone who divulges the will of the heaven like him must be a thorn in the capitalist side. Maybe he's even been locked up already." Gavin, this kid, had always liked conspiracy theories. But at the mention of incarceration, bafflingly, Melvin came to mind. It couldn't be so coincidental, right? But the timing did seem to match. You actually believe his nonsense? Luke elbowed Carter, disrupting his thoughts. That idol of his probably just doesn't want to be on the forum anymore. There were all sorts of online interest groups to cater to everyone's passions. However, it was possible that real life got in the way, changing someone's interest level. Come to think of it, Carter once had online friends too, but pretty much lost contact with all of them by now. Something must have happened to my idol. Gavin obviously disagreed with what Luke said. I must help him. Are you sure? Carter picked up the conversation. Did you forget the mission that you came into prison for? What mission? Luke asked. While Carter had said that he would tattle to Luke, he hadn't taken it to heart and gradually ended up forgetting about this offhand trifle. Ignoring Gavin's burning gaze, he told Luke about the kid's plan to mess with Melvin. At this, anyone could see that Luke was genuinely angry. You know how dangerous he is, right? And you still want to look for trouble? Luke flared up, scolding Gavin straight to the face. Look at old Nine, look at Ali. You only hurt your ankle that time, but if you keep going on, he might beat you up so badly that you'd be incapacitated for life. If I become incapacitated, Gavin mumbled softly, you'll take care of me, won't you, Dr. Luo? Are you listening to me at all? Hee, Dr. Luo is the best, Gavin cajoled, cackling. Get out. Luke pointed at the door. Don't keep running over to me when you've nothing better to do. Come on, relax, Dr. Luo. Gavin nestled in the chair, refusing to move. That evil guy is still locked up in confinement. How can I provoke him? Carter looked at those two banter back and forth, suddenly feeling a little extra. Gauging the time, Melvin should be let out of confinement tomorrow morning. Previously, Carter told him that he would chat with him if the mood struck him. In actuality, he hadn't been there once until now, not because he wasn't in the mood, but purely because he was too lazy to. However, it really was a bit boring today. Carter considered it. He bid Luke goodbye, then left for the library to take the strawberry planting techniques that he hadn't finished reading. Block A was the furthest block from the admin block. Carter walked over from the connecting corridor on the second floor, along the way running into many colleagues curious why he was appearing at the cell blocks. Carter merely said that he had something to do, bearing the weight of his colleagues' curious eyes as he arrived at the confinement cells. This was also a reason why Carter was too lazy to look for Melvin. Block A was too far away. On this walk over from the library, he had to greet God knows how many of his colleagues. It wasn't as if chatting with Melvin was some confidential secret. He had the book clamped under his arm. If anyone really persisted with their questions, he would brush them off saying that he was getting Melvin to study. Melvin's mood was visibly worse than 2 days ago. When Carter slid the window open, he languidly leaned over, greeting Carter. You're here, Officer James. He could hear a trace of complaint in his voice, as if asking him why had he only come now. Just like last time, Carter's back leaned against the door. As he flipped the book in his hands, he casually asked, Does it feel good being in confinement? Not really, Melvin said. Carter had seen inmates have mental breakdowns in confinement cells and knew that this wasn't a place for people to stay in. It really spoke lengths of how harsh Melvin was being on himself to exchange 72 hours in confinement for a single cell. If it doesn't feel good, then stop making trouble, Carter said. Carter flipped to where he had last stopped, cleared his throat, and began to read. Strawberry jam recipes. Officer James, Melvin interrupted Carter. On the rare occasion that you've made a trip down, you decide to read to me? It wasn't as though Carter was here to visit a neighbor. From the outset, with his status, there wasn't any reason for him to chat with Melvin. Melvin also seemed to think of this. Go on then. Rather than calling strawberry planting techniques a book, it was better called a booklet. Without any inflection, Carter tonelessly read every word on the paper, occasionally getting distracted by the slight rustling from behind the iron door. Melvin had likely leaned his head against the iron door, and with every action he made, his clothes and hair would rub against the door, sending faint vibrations through the iron door to Carter's side, causing his back to tingle. After a good while, Carter finally finished reading to the last word of the book. He closed the book, looked at the time, then spoke in the direction of the small window. "Finished it." "It's done?" Melvin's voice carried over from behind the door. "Then read it to me from the top again." Carter's lips twitched. "Do I seem that bored?" Melvin said, "I am bored." And he even proclaimed this reason with righteous conviction in his tone. Carter sat there without moving, but he didn't speak either. Anyway, getting him to read it once more was absolutely impossible. Melvin probably also knew that Carter wasn't someone with much patience, so he didn't insist on it, changing to say instead, "Then tell me a joke, Officer James." This request sounded a little more normal. The problem was, "I can't tell jokes," said Carter. "No way, Officer James." Melvin sounded astonished. "How can you not know how to tell a joke?" The way he said it was just as if Carter wasn't normal. He even doubted himself, wondering for a split second, could it be that telling jokes was a basic social skill of humans? Carter believed himself to have passable social skills. He had a friendly working relationship with all his colleagues. Conversely, it was Melvin who had weird-ass logic, making people drop dead of anger with just a few sentences. How could he have the gall to ridicule Carter for not being able to tell jokes? Silence descended again. For ages there wasn't a single movement behind the iron door. However, just then, Carter suddenly heard a light chuckle. Following it came long, drawn-out laughter. Even during the half-year thereabout he spent secretly observing Melvin, he had never seen him laugh this happily before. "Officer James." Melvin only contained his laughter with much difficulty. "Were you always this cute on the inside?" Carter's brows furrowed. He really didn't like Melvin calling him cute. No matter what, he was a 1.8-meter tall adult man. On his entire body, which spot of him was in any way cute? It must be that the baton hadn't greeted Melvin's body yet. Otherwise, he would never have been able to say such a thing. "I'm going off." Carter stood up, brushing off his pants, refusing to speak any further to Melvin, who had yet to stop laughing.